The prison ship moved slowly through the endless dark of space. Its hull was covered with strange glowing symbols, alive with alien energy. Inside the ship, the halls were silent, except for the heavy steps of armored guards. In the deepest part of the ship, behind thick metal doors, a single human sat in a cell. His name was Daniel. His hands were locked with glowing cuffs that burned if he tried to move too fast. To the aliens, he was nothing more than a weak creature they had captured. During one of their raids, they thought he was broken, harmless, a trophy prisoner. But Daniel was not what he seemed. He sat on the cold floor, with his back against the wall, his eyes half closed, as if he was tired. The aliens passing by looked at him with mocking smiles. Some whispered to each other in their strange language, their voices full of laughter. To them, humans were nothing but small animals, barely worth the effort. Yet Daniel remained calm. He listened carefully to every sound, the hiss of the door when it opened, the rhythm of the guards' boots, the faint hum of the ship's engines. He was counting, memorizing, building a picture of the prison in his mind. The cell was dim, lit only by a pale blue light that came from the cuffs around his wrists. They pulsed like living veins, feeding off his strength. Every now and then, one of the guards would stop, peer through the bars, and say something cruel in broken English. They wanted him to be afraid, but Daniel never spoke back. He just watched them with steady eyes, eyes that carried a promise they did not understand. The aliens thought silence meant weakness. They had no idea that silence was the sharpest weapon. Daniel had. When the guards finally left, Daniel leaned forward slightly, his lips curling into the faintest smile. Hidden beneath the cuff on his left wrist was something the aliens had missed. During the struggle on Earth, when they had dragged him onto their ship, they had searched him quickly, stripping away his gear. But they had overlooked a tiny implant, built into his skin, almost invisible. Now, it was active, sending out a faint signal, one the aliens could not detect. The light on the implant blinked once, then twice, then 3 times before fading again. Daniel saw it and felt a spark of hope. Someone, somewhere, might be listening. Still, he knew rescue might not come. He could not depend on anyone but himself. For now, patience was his only ally. He studied the guards carefully. Every shift, 2 guards patrolled the hallway outside. Their steps always echoed at the same interval. The door to his cell opened with a code, a pattern of symbols he had already memorized by watching the guards' hands through the bars. Even the smallest details mattered, the way the guards leaned on their rifles, the way their eyes wandered when they grew bored. Daniel was learning, and learning fast. Hours passed like days. The ship creaked as it moved, the metal groaning under strange alien pressure. Sometimes he could hear the muffled cries of other prisoners, though he could not see them, he realized. He was not alone, that many others were trapped in this floating prison. He wondered if they too were waiting, or if they had already given up. For Daniel, giving up was never an option. He had survived worse before. He had seen death up close, felt fear press down on him like a weight, and still he had endured. The aliens thought they had captured a weak creature, but they had no idea they had placed a wolf among their sheep. One of the guards returned later with food. It was a gray, slimy paste in a metal bowl, something no human stomach was meant to eat. The guard shoved it through the slot and laughed, expecting Daniel to choke on it. Daniel looked at the bowl without touching it. He was hungry, but he also knew he needed a clear mind. His hunger sharpened his focus, made him more aware. He pushed the bowl aside and sat back again. The guard shook his head, muttered something, and left. Daniel watched him go, then whispered under his breath, words too soft for anyone else to hear. Soon, time in the prison cell moved like slow poison. Each second was heavy, each hour endless. But Daniel's eyes never lost there. Fire. Every time the guards passed, every time the door opened, he studied. He noticed one guard always scratched the side of his helmet, another always dragged his left foot. Tiny flaws, human-like habits. Habits could be used. Habits could be broken. Daniel waited, storing each piece of information like a weapon in his mind, as the ship drifted through the void. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. To the guards, He looked like a man who had accepted defeat. But behind his closed eyes, he was remembering Earth. He remembered the sky, the sound of wind, the laughter of his friends. He remembered the moment of capture, the burning light as the aliens dragged him into their ship. Anger burned in him now, deep and steady. He was not just fighting to survive, he was fighting to return. Then, when the corridor outside grew silent, the signal on his implant blinked again, soft pulse of light against his skin. This time it stayed longer, almost like an answer. Daniel's heart beat faster, but he kept his face still, calm, unreadable. The aliens had no idea what was coming. To them, he was a prisoner, locked in chains. To Daniel, the chains were nothing but a delay. The game had already begun, and he was the one writing the rules, in the silence of the cell, with only the faint glow of the cuffs for company. Daniel leaned his head back against the wall and smiled again. He looked like a man waiting. But inside he was a storm. The prison ship never slept. Its engines hummed day and night, a constant vibration in the metal walls. Guards walked the halls in endless shifts, their armored boots echoing like drums of war. To the aliens, the human was still nothing more than a captured creature, locked and forgotten. But Daniel had already made his decision. The waiting was over. Tonight, he would make his first move. 2 guards approached his cell with the same careless steps as always. One of them laughed, pointing at Daniel, who sat against the wall with his head lowered. To them, he looked weak, almost broken. They tapped on the bars and mocked him in their harsh language. One of them even pretended to stumble, waving his arms as if mocking human clumsiness. Daniel did not react. His stillness was his shield. Inside, however, his mind was sharp as a blade. When they left, Daniel's eyes opened, cold and steady. He knew their routine. He knew when they passed, when they turned, and how long the hallway stayed empty before the next shift arrived. He had memorized the rhythm of the ship, the pulse of the enemy. Now he needed only one mistake, just one small opening to strike. Hours crawled past. The blue light of his cuffs flickered in the dark cell, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. His implant blinked once more, faint and brief, reminding him that his hidden advantage still worked. The aliens had missed it, and that mistake was going to cost them everything. Finally, the moment arrived. A faint alarm echoed somewhere far down the ship, a mechanical wail followed by a burst of static. The guards outside his section grew distracted, whispering to each other. One of them left his post to check, leaving only a single guard walking the hall. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. This was it. The remaining guard stopped at Daniel's cell, looking through the bars. He muttered something in his language, tapping the rifle against the door as if daring Daniel to move. Daniel's head tilted up slowly, his eyes locking onto the guards. For a brief second, the alien froze. The calm, unshaken stare of the human unsettled him. A pause barely longer than a breath was all Daniel needed. He shifted his wrists, pressing the glowing cuffs against the implant hidden beneath his skin. The implant released a faint spark, just enough to disrupt the energy flow. The cuffs flickered once, then went dark. Daniel's hands were free. Quietly, carefully, he lowered them to his side, his movements hidden in shadow. The guard didn't notice. Daniel bent down and picked up the metal bowl of untouched food. His steps were silent as he moved closer to the bars. The guard leaned forward, curious. That was his final mistake. With a sudden burst of strength, Daniel hurled the bowl at the wall, making it crash and echo through the hall. The guard spun around, confused. In that instant, Daniel slipped through the bars. The door had been left slightly loose from poor alien maintenance, something Daniel had noticed days ago. He moved like a shadow, silent and fast. Before the guard could raise his weapon, Daniel was behind him. He wrapped one arm around the alien's throat, pulling tight while his other hand grabbed the rifle. The alien struggled, claws scraping the wall, but Daniel did not let go. His grip tightened until the alien went limp. Slowly, Daniel lowered the body to the floor. Silent as stone, the rifle felt strange in his hands, heavier than any human weapon. Its barrel glowed with faint green energy, humming like a living thing. Daniel studied it quickly, his soldier's instincts waking. He didn't know the full mechanics, but he didn't need to. Point, aim, fire, every weapon in the galaxy followed. That same law. His heart raced, but his face remained calm. He had done it. For the first time since his capture, he was free. Still, freedom meant nothing if he couldn't escape the ship. An escape meant patience. He couldn't fight all the guards at once. He needed to move with silence. Strike only. When unseen, Daniel dragged the alien body into the shadows of the cell and covered it with the ragged blanket from his bed. To anyone passing by, it would look like the human was still sitting there, head lowered. That would buy him time. He stepped into the hallway, rifle in hand, eyes scanning every corner. The air smelled different, here sterile, metallic, mixed, with something strange and bitter. The hum of the ship was louder too, like a heartbeat pulsing through the walls. He walked quietly, counting his steps, remembering the map in his head. The storage room was not far. He had seen the guards carry supplies in that direction. If he could reach it, maybe he would find more weapons, maybe even tools to help him break the ship's systems. The hallway stretched ahead, lit by dim green lights that flickered with each power surge. Daniel pressed himself against the wall. When he heard voices, 2 more guards appeared at the far end, their weapons slung carelessly over their shoulders. They were laughing, distracted, their attention elsewhere. Daniel's fingers tightened on the rifle. He could attack, but the noise would draw more guards. He had to think smarter. He crouched low and picked up a loose shard of metal from the floor. With a quick throw, he sent it clattering down a side corridor. The sound echoed sharply. The 2 guards stopped, then walked toward the noise, muttering in confusion. Daniel slipped past them, silent as smoke, his movements hidden in the shadows. Step by step, he moved deeper into the ship. The corridors twisted like a maze, full of strange doors and glowing panels. He could hear muffled cries against the voices of other prisoners locked in their cells. Some sounded broken, others angry. Daniel's chest tightened. He could not free them now, not yet, but he made himself a promise. He would not leave them here to die. At last, he reached the storage room. Door. Its lock glowed with alien symbols, shifting like liquid. Daniel studied it quickly, then pressed his implant against the panel. Sparks danced across the surface, and the lock flickered. With a hiss, the door slid open. Inside were racks of weapons, armor, and strange equipment. Daniel stepped inside, eyes sharp, heart steady. He had made his first move. The game had changed. He was no longer their prisoner. He was their hunter. The storage room was dark and full of strange shapes. Tall racks stretched to the ceiling, each one holding alien weapons, tools, and equipment Daniel had never seen before. The air smelled sharp, like burned metal and oil. Eyes adjusted. Slowly as he moved between the shelves, every step careful, every breath controlled. The glowing rifle in his hand hummed softly, its energy pulsing like a heartbeat. He knew he had little time. At any moment, the guards would discover the missing soldier, and then alarms would flood the ship. Daniel studied the weapons. Some looked like rifles, others like curved blades with glowing edges. There were strange devices with wires and glass tubes, heavy armor plates too large for him to wear. He reached for something smaller, a pistol-sized weapon that fit better. In his hand, the surface felt warm, alive, as if it knew he was holding it. He strapped it to his side, keeping the rifle slung across his back. A soldier always needed a backup. At the corner of the room, he saw a panel glowing faintly. He approached and pressed his hand against it. The screen shifted, showing alien symbols. Daniel couldn't read the language, but the layout was familiar. A map. His eyes widened. The ship wasn't small, it was massive, like a floating fortress. Dozens of corridors, multiple decks, and at least 4 prisoner blocks spread across its belly. He zoomed in, his heart sinking. There were hundreds of prisoners locked inside, not just him, different species, different cells. The ship wasn't. Only a prison, it was a warehouse of slaves. Daniel leaned back, his jaw tightening. He had come here thinking only of escape, but now he knew he couldn't just run. If he left, those voices he heard in the dark would stay behind forever. And he couldn't live with that. Slowly he whispered to himself, "I'm not escaping alone, not this time." He backed away from the map and returned to the shelves. He grabbed a small pack and filled it with anything that looked useful: energy cells, wires, even a curved blade he didn't understand. A soldier always carried more than one tool. The pack felt heavy against his shoulders, but weight was better than weakness. Just as he turned, the door behind him hissed. Daniel froze. A shadow stretched across the floor, tall and jagged. Another. Guard. The alien stepped inside, its head turning left and right. It muttered something suspicious, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Daniel crouched behind a rack, pressing his back against cold metal. His fingers tightened on the pistol. He could fire, but the sound might bring a dozen more. Silence was his only weapon now. The alien walked deeper into the room, its clawed feet clicking softly. Daniel waited, his heartbeat loud in his ears. When the guard turned its back, Daniel moved. Silent, smooth, fast. He rose like a shadow and grabbed the alien from behind, locking his arm around its throat. The alien struggled, claws slashing at the air. But Daniel's grip was iron. He pulled tight until the body went limp, then lowered it gently to the floor. No sound, no alarm. The silent escape continued. Dragging the body behind a rack, Daniel covered it with a tarp and slipped back into the hall. The corridor outside was dim, lit by a green glow. He crouched low and moved quickly, his eyes scanning every shadow. His mind replayed the map he had seen. If he turned left here, he would reach a ventilation shaft that cut across the deck. It was a risk, but it would keep him hidden. As he moved, he passed the first row of cells. Prisoners inside stirred when they saw him. Strange creatures with glowing eyes and thin bodies pressed against the bars, whispering in languages Daniel didn't know. One of them raised a claw and tapped the glass, pointing at Daniel's weapon. Their voices were filled with hope and fear. Daniel pressed a finger to his lips, a universal command for silence. The creatures stepped back, obeying. "Wait," he gave them. A small nod, a promise in his eyes. Not yet, but soon. The hallway stretched ahead, and at the end, he found the shaft. Its grate was locked with another panel of glowing symbols. Daniel knelt, pressing his implant against the lock. Sparks flashed, and the grate slid open with a hiss. He climbed inside, pulling it shut behind him. The space was narrow and smelled of rust, but it was safer than walking in the open. He crawled forward, each movement slow, careful. Below him, he could see through cracks in the metal. Guards walked the halls, their weapons glowing in the dark. Some of them argued, their voices sharp. They had discovered something wrong. Perhaps the missing guard. Perhaps the broken cuffs. Daniel's lips tightened. He didn't have much time before the whole ship was hunting him. The shaft stretched on, twisting left and right. Sweat ran down his neck, but he kept moving. Finally, he reached another grate. Through it, he could see a larger chamber full of machines glowing with blue light, the ship's power room. Daniel's eyes narrowed. If he could reach that, maybe he could shut down the systems, maybe even disable the prison locks. It was dangerous, but it could turn the tables faster than anything else. He eased the grate open and dropped into the chamber, landing softly on the floor. The machines hummed around him, their cores pulsing like beating hearts. Strange cables ran across the room, feeding into the walls. He approached one of the consoles, laying his hand on it. The implant on his wrist glowed faintly, reacting to the alien technology. For a moment, the symbols on the console flickered and shifted, almost translating themselves. Daniel smiled. He could work with this, as he pressed a sequence of symbols. The lights dimmed. Far away, he heard the echo of doors unlocking, a metallic groan spreading through the ship. His chest tightened. The prisoners. He had opened some of the cells. Not all, but enough. The rebellion had begun, whether he was ready or not. From the hall outside, alarms suddenly blared, red lights flashing across the walls. Guards shouted, their voices sharp and angry. Daniel gripped his rifle, his eyes cold. The silent escape was over. Now the fight was coming to him. He whispered under his breath, steady and calm. "Let's see if you can cage me now." The alarms screamed through the prison ship, their metallic wails shaking the walls. Red lights flashed in every corridor, painting the metal halls in blood. Guards ran in formation, their weapons glowing, their voices shouting commands in their harsh alien tongue. The quiet order of the ship was gone. Chaos had begun, and at the center of it was one human. Daniel crouched in the power chamber, his rifle in hand. His implant still glowed faintly from the hack he had forced into the system. He had not meant to free the prisoners so soon, but it was too late now. The doors had opened, and the ship was no longer silent. Strange roars and cries echoed through the deck's voices of species who had been trapped for months, maybe years, now suddenly tasting freedom. Some ran wild, some fought back, and some cowered in fear. Daniel knew what that meant. Panic. Panic was dangerous, but panic could also be used. He slipped out of the chamber into a side hall, his steps fast but quiet. Ahead, 3 guards turned. The corner, their weapons raised. Daniel didn't hesitate. He dropped low and fired his alien pistol. A green beam shot forward, striking the first guard in the chest. The alien screamed as its armor cracked with burning light. The other 2 roared, raising their weapons, but Daniel was already moving. He slid behind cover, fired again, and the second guard fell. The third hesitated, unsure of where the attack came from. Daniel stepped out, calm and steady, and finished him with a single shot. The corridor was his. For now, he dragged the bodies into a corner and pressed on, moving toward the prisoner blocks. As he ran, he saw flashes of movement in the distant shapes rushing through the halls, freed creatures slashing at guards with claws and teeth. The rebellion was spreading faster than he expected. The aliens had built this ship to hold prisoners like trophies, but now it was turning against them. Daniel's lips curled into a small smile. This was no longer their prison. It was becoming his battlefield. He reached the first block. The heavy doors hung open, sparking and damaged from his earlier hack. Inside, prisoners spilled into the hall, creatures of all kinds. Some were tall with glowing eyes, some short with sharp teeth, some carried pieces of broken chains as weapons. When they saw Daniel, they froze. For a moment, silence stretched between them. He was not like them, not from their worlds. Yet he was the one holding a weapon, the one standing free while the alarms screamed. One of the prisoners, a tall creature, with gray skin and tusks, stepped forward. His voice was rough, but his words broke in English. "You human, you did this." Daniel nodded once. His voice was steady. "Yes. But if you want to live, don't waste time staring. Fight." Tusked creature growled, then raised his broken chain and roared. Others roared with him, their voices filling the hall. Daniel turned away, moving deeper into the ship. He would fight their own battles now. He didn't need to lead every strike. He only needed to guide the storm. As he moved, more prisoners joined the chaos. The halls became battlefields. Guards tried to hold the lines, but they were unprepared for a prison full of enemies turning against them at once. Laser fire lit the air, claws tore into armor, and alien blood stained the floors. Daniel used the chaos like cover. While the guards fought prisoners, he slipped through shadows, striking only when it mattered. His shots were precise, his movements calm, his focus razor sharp. In one corridor, he found a group of smaller prisoners cornered by 2 guards. They were unarmed, their bodies pressed against the wall in fear. Daniel raised his rifle and fired before the guards could finish them. The green beams cut through the air, striking both soldiers down. The prisoners looked at him with wide eyes, some whispering in their strange tongues. Daniel gave them a short nod, then moved on. Saving them was not about kindness, it was strategy. Every freed prisoner was another distraction for the enemy. The ship shook suddenly, a heavy boom echoing through the decks. Daniel staggered, pressing a hand against the wall. Something had exploded far away. Maybe the prisoners had reached the armory. Maybe they had destroyed part of the engines. Either way, the chaos was growing. The battlefield was alive. But Daniel knew the fight was not over. In fact, it was only beginning. He could hear the alien commander's voice now, booming through the ship's speakers. The words were in their tongue, but the meaning was clear. Orders, threats, rage. The commander was trying to restore control, demanding that the guards crush the rebellion and capture the human alive. They finally understood the danger he posed. He turned down another hall only to stop cold. At the far end, a squad of heavily armored guards blocked the way. Their weapons were larger, their armor thicker, their movements sharp. These were not regular guards. These were enforcers. They had been waiting for him. Daniel's heart pounded, but his face stayed calm. He ducked into a side corridor just as the enforcers opened fire. Beams of searing light cut into the walls, sparks flying. He rolled into cover and returned fire, his shots precise but struggling against their heavy armor. He cursed under his breath. These were not enemies he could take head-on. He needed another way. Then he noticed the pipes running along the ceiling. Steam hissed from one of them, glowing faintly with heat. An idea formed. He raised his pistol and fired at the pipe. The beam struck, and the pipe exploded with a blast of burning steam. The enforcers roared as the hall filled with smoke and fire. Daniel moved fast, slipping through the chaos, firing only when he had a clear shot. One by one, the enforcers fell, their armor cracked, their bodies collapsing. When the smoke cleared, Daniel stood at the end of the hall, breathing hard, rifle steady. The floor was littered with bodies. He pressed forward, his boots splashing. In pools of alien blood, the ship around him was no longer a prison. It was war. Every corridor was a battlefield, every door a trap. The aliens thought they had captured a weak human. Instead, they had given him their fortress to turn against them. And Daniel was only getting started. He whispered to himself, his voice cold and certain, "This is my ship now." The prison ship groaned as if alive, its metal body shaking with the weight of battle. Smoke filled the air, alarms screamed without pause, and the once-controlled order of the alien guards had collapsed into panic. What was once their proud prison fortress was now a maze of chaos, and in the middle of it all walked Daniel, no longer a prisoner but a hunter. He moved through the corridors with steady steps, rifle in hand, eyes sharp. Round him, freed prisoners fought the guards with fury. Some used stolen weapons, others fought with claws, teeth, or even their chains. Their screams mixed with the roars of alien soldiers, the air heavy with the smell of fire and blood. To Daniel, this wasn't just escape anymore. This was war. He had one goal now, reach the command deck. If he could take it, he would control the ship. And once he had the ship, the entire galaxy would know what one human could do. As he moved deeper, he came across a group of prisoners cornered by guards near a blast door. Without hesitation, Daniel aimed and fired. Green beams tore through the soldiers, dropping them to the floor. The prisoners looked at him with wide eyes. One of them, a creature with scaled skin, hissed a question in its tongue. Daniel didn't understand the words, but he understood the look. They were asking if he was leading them. Daniel's reply was short. "Follow me if you want to live." They did. More and more began to gather behind him as he moved in. Army of the Forgotten, united not by trust, but by desperation. They followed. Because he moved with purpose, because he fought with precision, because his calm in the storm gave them hope. Daniel never asked for followers, but now he had them. The ship trembled again, another explosion shaking the walls. Overhead, the alien commander's voice boomed through the speakers. The words were sharp, furious, commanding every guard to focus on one target, the human. Daniel smirked as he heard it. Out of all the prisoners, out of all the chaos, they feared him most. That meant he had already won half the battle. Fear was the sharpest weapon of all. Turning a corner, Daniel stopped suddenly. Ahead of him stretched a massive hangar, wide and tall, its walls lined with alien ships. Fighters rested on platforms glowing with faint energy. But the hangar wasn't empty. Dozens of guards stood in formation, blocking the path. Their weapons were raised, their armor gleaming red under the warning lights. Behind them, at the far end of the hangar, was the door that led to the command deck. Daniel's followers froze, their eyes full of fear. This was no small squad. This was an army. For a moment, silence filled the hangar. The guards stood ready, the prisoners huddled close, and Daniel stepped forward alone. His rifle hummed in his hands, his implant pulsed faintly under his skin. He knew this was the turning point. He raised his voice, calm and steady. They think we are nothing, think we are slaves, weak, broken. But look at them now. Look how afraid they are. The prisoners stirred, their fear shifting into something. Harder, the guard shouted, beginning to advance. Daniel's voice cut through the chaos. This is not their ship anymore. It is ours, and I say we take it. The roar that followed shook the hangar. Prisoners surged forward, charging with chains, claws, and stolen rifles. The guards fired, beams cutting through the air, but the tide could not be stopped. Daniel moved at the front, his shots precise, his movements sharp. Every step brought him closer to the command deck. The battle was brutal. Aliens fell screaming, prisoners collapsed in smoke, but still the fight pushed forward. Daniel moved like a storm, ducking behind cover, striking fast, never wasting a shot. His implant flickered again, giving him access to a nearby control. Panel, he slammed his hand against it, and suddenly the hangar doors burst open. Cold space wind roared inside, pulling soldiers off their feet and out into the void. Guards screamed as they were torn from the floor, their bodies spinning into the stars. Daniel and his followers clung to the floor, their grips tight. With one command, he had turned the battlefield to his side. When the doors sealed again, the hangar was quiet, except for heavy breathing and the hum of engines. The guards were gone. The path to the command deck was open. Daniel stood slowly, his chest rising and falling, his rifle still warm in his hands. Around him, the prisoners stared in silence. For the first time, they looked at him not just as another fighter, but as a leader. Daniel did not waste time. He turned toward the great door and spoke only 2 words. "Me." They followed. The climb to the command deck was not easy. Enforcers tried to stop them, ambushing in tight corridors. Daniel led the charge, using traps, pipes, and even the ship's systems to crush them. He set doors to lock, vents to explode, lights to blind. Each fight was hard, but each one ended the same way, the human side pushing forward, the aliens falling back. Finally, they reached the last hall. At the end stood the great door to the command deck. The surface glowed with strange energy, stronger than any door before. Daniel knew the alien commander was inside, could feel it, the weight of the enemy waiting for him. He placed his hand against the panel. His implant sparked, the lock flickered, and the door hissed open. The command deck glowed with alien light. At the center stood the commander, taller and stronger than any guard, his armor black and marked with red scars. His eyes burned with fury as he stared at Daniel. The commander raised his weapon, his voice booming. Daniel stepped forward, calm and steady, his rifle in his hands. The tables had turned. The prisoner was now the executioner. The command deck was silent except for the low hum of alien machines. The great windows looked out into the endless dark of space, stars burning cold and distant. At the center stood the alien commander, tall and terrifying in black armor that shimmered with red light. His weapon glowed like molten fire, pulsing with deadly power. Around him, alien officers worked frantically at their stations, their claws tapping controls, their voices sharp with fear. They all froze when the doors hissed open and Daniel stepped inside. He moved slowly, rifle raised, his boots echoing against the floor. Behind him, the freed prisoners waited at the doorway, their eyes filled with hope and fury. They did not step forward. This fight was Daniel's alone. Everyone felt it. Even the commander. The alien leader spoke in a deep, harsh voice, his words sharp and full of venom. Daniel didn't understand the language, but the meaning was clear. The commander was mocking him, calling him weak, a mistake of nature, a creature that had no place standing here. Daniel's face stayed calm, his eyes cold. He spoke back in a steady voice. You thought I was your prisoner? You thought you could break me? But you forgot one thing. Humans don't break. We fight. The commander roared, raising his weapon. Energy flared, and the floor shook with its power. Daniel moved first. He rolled aside as a beam of searing light ripped through the wall where he had been standing. Sparks exploded. Smoke filled the air. Daniel rose and fired back, his shots striking the commander's armor, leaving glowing marks but not breaking through. The alien charged, faster than Daniel expected. The commander swung his massive weapon like a blade, the energy burning through the air. Daniel ducked, the heat grazing his face. He fired point blank into the alien's chest, but the armor held. The commander grabbed him and threw him across the room. Daniel hit the wall hard, his ribs screaming in pain, but he forced himself up. He could not stop. Not here. Not now. The commander came again, his strikes heavy and brutal. Daniel dodged, barely staying alive. He used the consoles for cover, rolling, and firing, every shot aimed at weak points in the armor. But the alien was strong, too strong. One strike caught Daniel's arm, sending his rifle flying across the floor. The weapon skidded to a stop far away. The commander raised his glowing weapon for the final blow. The prisoners at the door cried, "Out!" But Daniel lifted his hand, signaling them not to move. This was his fight. He reached down to his side and pulled the smaller alien pistol from his belt. He fired fast, each shot precise, aiming not at the armor, but at the floor panels and machines around them. Sparks erupted, smoke poured out, and the room shook as systems overloaded. The commander roared in anger, swinging wildly. Daniel ducked, low, rolled forward, and stabbed upward with the curved alien blade he had taken earlier. The glowing edge slid between the plates of armor at the commander's side. The alien staggered back, howling in pain. Daniel ripped the blade free and pressed his attack, striking again and again, aiming at every gap in the armor he could find. The commander fought back, furious, but his movements slowed. His armor cracked, his weapon sputtered, his strength failing. Finally, Daniel leaped onto him, driving the blade deep into the alien's chest. The glow of the armor faded. The commander fell to his knees, his roar turning into a choking gasp. Daniel stood over him, breathing hard, his body burning with pain but his eyes steady. He whispered, cold and sharp, "The tables have turned." With one last strike, he ended it. The commander collapsed, his body crashing to the floor. Silence filled the command deck. The officers froze in fear, their eyes wide. Slowly, one by one, they backed away from their controls, lowering their heads. In surrender, Daniel pulled the blade free and stood tall. He looked at the prisoners gathered at the door. The first time since their capture, their faces lit with true hope. They cheered, voices of dozens of species rising together, echoing through the ship like thunder. Daniel turned to the consoles. His implant glowed as he pressed his hand against the main control panel. The system bent to his will, the alien symbols shifting and opening. He locked the guards out, freed every prisoner block, and took full control of the ship. The prison was his now. The speakers across the vessel crackled to life. Daniel's voice carried to every corner, steady and unshaken. "You are free. This ship no longer belongs to them. It belongs to us." Cheers erupted across the decks. The sound of chains breaking, of doors slamming open, of voices crying in joy spread through the halls. For the first time in years, the prisoners were no longer slaves. They were free because of one man, one human. Daniel stood at the great window of the command deck, looking out at the stars. The alien ship was his. The galaxy would hear of this. They would tell stories of the day a single human, chained and mocked, turned a prison into a battlefield and brought an empire to its knees. He opened the long-range coms, his voice steady as steel. To anyone listening, humanity is not weak. We are not prey. We are hunters, and we are coming. The message spread across the stars, unstoppable. Daniel looked at the freed prisoners behind him. Some smiled, some cried, but all of them looked at him with respect. He had been their prisoner. Now he was their commander. In the silence that followed, Daniel whispered one last promise to himself. They will never cage us again.